Stress. We use the word to describe so many aspects of our lives, but there are real world consequences to understanding what real stress is and how it impacts our bodies and, quite frankly, our mortality. Today, we're going to sort out stress. When does it shorten your life, and when is it just a word we're using to describe a completely different feeling? How does it relate to control and power? And how can you use all this knowledge to decide if leaving your job will help you live longer? Now, before we get into the deeper topic of stress, please help me reduce my own by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me get the message out. YouTube starts putting my videos in front of more users when it's being liked and when I have more subscribers. So thank you for the help. All right, let's all take a sip of decaf Zen tea, take a long, deep breath, and get into the topic of stress. Stress. It's everywhere. I can't remember a time in my lifetime when the world has had more collective stress than it has now, and I have a theory about why that is, which we'll talk about in a moment. The list is long for many of us. We don't just have stress in our personal and work lives, but our hyper-connected world means we can stress about things in concentric circles around us, expanding to the entire globe. We can stress about local issues, but also stress about the fate of an endangered animal 3 continents away, or the plight of a people on the other side of the globe. And modern media capitalizes on outrage to get ratings, so things to be stressed about seem to be in endless supply because it keeps us glued to our screens. As we'll discuss shortly, our brains and bodies have not evolved to handle the increased awareness brought about by this level of connectivity. When someone says, ignorance is bliss, they are describing the relief from stress brought about by simply not knowing something is going on. Let's get some clarity in our minds about what actual stress is, because the word is overused and that's not helpful. Evolutionarily speaking, stress is meant to be a lifesaver, but it's also a life shortener. If there is a perceived threat to our survival, the body has evolved physiological reactions to increase the chances of our survival. I won't go deeply into them here, but they stem, pun intended, from an area near our brain stem called the amygdala. This area triggers fight or flight responses through the secretion of hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. This chemical cocktail tells our body to get ready to run or fight. Crucial bodily functions like digestion, healing, hunger, etc. all get put on hold. Because what's the point to any of that if you don't survive the next 5 minutes? The body's making a trade, shortening our lives by stealing some minutes from the future so that we can survive another day today. If we're facing a saber-toothed tiger, this makes sense. If we're facing an impossible deadline at work, it doesn't. Unfortunately, our bodies don't know the difference. So, the first thing to really grasp onto here is that stress triggers a physiological response in the body that can ultimately shorten our life. When that trade is made to save our lives today, it's well worth it. But is it worth it when those aren't the stakes? So, when I use the word stress, I'm talking about the feeling that triggers this response, but many of us use the term to describe other situations, and that's not helping us make good decisions about staying or leaving jobs and relationships. For example, we can use the word stress to describe exhilaration, excitement, challenge, or even just working hard. All right, I can hear you saying, whoa, Sean, what are you talking about? Working hard is stressful. That's the epitome of stress creation. Well, yes and no. To understand the subtle but crucial difference between hard work that causes stress and hard work that doesn't, we must introduce another concept: control. You see, if you have a pile of work to do, you have plenty of time to do it, and are methodical, you are in control of the situation. Your body will not trigger that physiological response. But if that pile of work seems to have no end, and is coming in faster than it's getting done, and you don't feel like you have any control over the pacing or the deadlines for when it's expected to be done, your body will physiologically treat that situation like a saber-toothed tiger. Now, did you notice the words feel like there? You don't feel like you're in control? Those words are important. People who are resilient in these moments are able to either notice the lack of control and grab it, or convince themselves to let go of what they can't control. This is where the wisdom of the serenity prayer comes in. Just hear these words in the context of stress and control. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This is called the serenity prayer because it leads to a serene life, calm, peaceful, and untroubled, tranquil. Doesn't that sound wonderful? So often we're suffering from stress because we've surrendered control over a situation that feels dire. Some people do this as a way of living, professional victims as I call them, people who never miss an opportunity to be a pinball in someone else's game. It's easier for them to be bounced around by other people's actions than to control their own, I suppose. But this leads to a life of stress where they never truly feel in control. Missing that key element, any event they perceive as uncomfortable or threatening becomes a physiologically stressful one where the rest of us take control of the situation and move on. You may have someone say, well, I work well under stress, or sometimes I work better under stress. People who say this are not describing the kind of stress we are talking about here. They're describing pressure, urgency, and challenge. They will tell you they work best this way only because they also feel as if they are in control. I promise you, the minute they perceive the challenge as impossible, or where they have little or no control over the circumstances, they will suffer the same performance hit and biological response that the rest of us do. I believe this is the reason we have so much more collective stress as a planet now. We have a digitally connected awareness of what is going on everywhere without any ability to control much of it. That is the formula for stress. Let's take an emergency room doctor as an example for this control dynamic. The job is what many of us would describe as stressful, no? People's lives hang in the balance. But experienced emergency room doctors have an immense amount of training, equipment, and equally well-trained assistants to get the job done. The nature of the job is quite unpredictable. Could be a quiet night in the ER, or a complete nightmare right after a mass shooting. But ER doctors have as much control as they can have, and they have a form of a serenity prayer for the rest. They save who they can, know they can only control what they can control, and let go of the rest. It's the nature of the word triage, a French word that means to separate, sort, shift, or select. Put bluntly, ER doctors sort patients into those who can wait, those who can't, and those who it's too late to save. How is that not the serenity to accept the things they cannot change, the courage to change the things they can, and the wisdom to know the difference? For simplicity, I often refer to the in-control version of stress as challenge stress, and the no-control version as impossible stress. Here's the fascinating part. Human beings have a physiological reaction to challenge stress too, but it's a good one. We secrete oxytocin, a hormone that tends to make us want to cooperate and trust others. This gets the "we can do this" vibe flowing. But push that challenge stress into impossible stress, all those good chemicals are replaced with bad ones. And then we get the "get out of my way, I'll do it" vibe flowing, assuming we're not figuratively in the fetal position. Leaders, take this as a big hint that team performance and connection is usually enhanced by challenge stress and destroyed by impossible stress. Make sure your teams feel in control or you're creating the latter. Now, we can apply this to better understand the danger of procrastination. Say we have something big that needs to be done at some point in the future. Early on, we feel like we are in control, which is why we can choose to put it off. But as time passes, our control is beginning to wane. The deadline is approaching, and we're in challenge stress territory. This is your final time to take action where you will feel in control. But if you procrastinate too long, anything that goes wrong at that point will suddenly send you into a panic as you now have nearly zero control over the situation. So let's tie all this together to wrap this up. If you're at work feeling stress, ask yourself if there's any control over the situation you can get or that you have but you've forgotten you have. Control will bring impossible stress down to challenge stress and get the right juices flowing, so to speak. Perhaps the work feels overwhelming because you haven't triaged it. Like that ER doctor, which work needs urgent attention, which can wait, and which should you surrender? Sometimes just the triage of the work makes all the difference. One way that I like to do this is to make a four-square with two axes, impact and effort. And then everything gets put into one of those four boxes. Low effort, low impact, low effort, high impact, high effort, low impact, and high effort, high impact. And then I build a priority list with the low effort, high impact work at the top. One quick example of this, I was once coaching a team that could not get on top of their quality issues. They had a ton of tickets, and one of the things they identified as a problem was their error logs were full of erroneous messages being created by other teams, basically false alarms. They had resigned themselves to ignore them, but they made troubleshooting the real problems much harder. Fixing those false alarms went into the low effort, high impact box. With a cleaner log, they were able to spot and fix the problems later. This four-square does result in a prioritized list, say ranked 1 to 10. When work keeps piling in or when your boss asks for something, you can show them the list and ask them to help you figure out where their ask goes. I've had the situation where a boss asked me for something, and when I showed them the list of things I was working on, they stopped, thought about it for a second, and then they said, "You know what? What I'm asking for isn't as important as any of those things. I'll get it done another way. Thank you." And when I coach leaders and I tell them that their teams are complaining about the onslaught of work, the number one reply I hear from leaders is, "Why didn't they tell me? They always just take the work and get it done, so I figured everything was fine." So, employees, tell your leaders what you're up to. It demonstrates that you are in control of your work and intend to stay that way. You'll gladly drop something for the boss anytime, but make sure the boss knows what you are up to and helps you choose what to drop by seeing what's on your plate. If you truly have no control over the mountain of work you're facing and cannot adopt the serenity prayer about it without jeopardizing your job, it's time to look for another job or another relationship if that's the area causing stress. In my own life, I've learned to look for my control, and when I can't find it, I do what I can to move away from whatever is causing me stress. That doesn't mean I live a stress-free life. Most of us can't completely eliminate it. It just means that I do what I can to minimize the times when that harmful chemical cocktail is flowing through my system. Oh, and shut off the news sometimes. Do some news fasting and give your mind a rest from the digital onslaught of horrors around the world. Your body will reward you by keeping those extra days at the end rather than sacrificing them for an event happening to others on the other side of the planet. Those people should be ignoring what's happening in your part of the world too. I hope you found this video helpful in sorting through your own stress. Leave a comment below about your own journey with stress, control, and serenity. Thanks for watching. Take a deep breath, and I'll see you next time.